He's not a lone wolf. The 18-year-old who traveled to Buffalo to live stream a shooting spree targeting black shoppers enjoyed plenty of help, you might say. First, there was that anything goes internet where hate can spread at the speed of light, and a land of the free mantra where he could buy assault weapons over the counter. The investigation will reveal if there were more people who are accessories. But beyond the accessories, how many enablers? A fringe conspiracy theory imported from France is gaining airtime and traction. We'll ask about the so-called Great Replacement and how it seeped into prime time on Fox News and into talking points of seemingly mainstream Republican leaders. Will they carry white supremacist ideas all the way to victory in November's midterm elections? It's not just the U.S., by the way, that has a problem. In France, a TV pundit who drifted far-right got 7% of the vote in last month's presidential election. Éric Zemmour lost. But what about his ideas on Muslims and immigrants, as France currently relives the ordeal of 2015 with the Paris attacks trial? Have jihadist radicals found common cause with far-right demagogues also rooting for a nihilistic great war of civilization? Today in the France 24 debate, we're asking if racism is going mainstream. And joining us in this edition is historian Curtis Young, professor of literature at ESSEC Business School. How are you?
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. Thanks as well to Paul Reen of President of Republicans in France.
Thank you.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. It's an all too familiar sight, a U.S. president comforting victims of a mass shooting, 10 killed on Saturday in Buffalo, New York. That's in the west of that state. And amid the investigation, the questions over the rise in hate crimes. The U.S. president mincing no words in his speech a short while ago.
This venom, this violence cannot be the story of our time. We cannot allow that to happen. Look, I'm not naive. I know tragedy will come again. It cannot be forever overcome. It cannot be fully understood either. But there are certain things we can do. We can keep assault weapons off our streets. You can't prevent people from being radicalized to violence. But we can address the relentless exploitation of the internet to recruit and mobilize terrorism.
We'll pick up on that point about the exploitation of the internet. First, though, a reminder that it is coming in an environment where there has been a growing amount of hate crimes that have been taking place of late. Jenny Shin has more.
It's a grim tally. Since a decade ago, racially motivated attacks are on the rise in the United States. The COVID-19 pandemic fueled violence against the Asian community over the country. In March 2021, a 21-year-old man targeted 3 massage parlors in Atlanta, leaving 8 dead, including 6 women of Asian origin. Activists say the statement of Donald Trump, president at the time of the outbreak of the pandemic, only amplified anti-Asian hate.
When the President of the United States calls the coronavirus the China virus, Kung flu, that's an insult to all of us as Asians. So they are blaming us for a virus that has nothing to do with us in America.
In August of 2019, a massacre of 23 people in a supermarket in Texas by a man claiming to be a far-right militant. In a statement to the police, he explained he wanted to kill as many Mexicans as possible. A year earlier, in 2018, a white supremacist burst into a Pittsburgh synagogue and shot 11 people to death in what became the deadliest anti-Semitic attack in the history of the United States.
This is the most horrific crime scene I've seen in 22 years with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Members of the Tree of Life Synagogue, conducting a peaceful service in their place of worship, were brutally murdered by a gunman targeting them simply because of their faith.
And in June of 2015, a 21-year-old man opened fire in a church in South Carolina, claiming the lives of 9 African Americans. In the past several years, the so-called Great Replacement theory has been gaining ground in the US. The racist conspiracy theory claims that the white population would be gradually replaced to extinction by non-white immigrants. Investigators of mass shootings found that the xenophobic theory has inspired several perpetrators of recent attacks.
Well, before we go to our panel in the studio, let's cross to Jennifer Carlson, who is a public affairs director, founder of the public affairs firm Abraham Crown and Associates, and who happens to be in Buffalo. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. Did you get a chance to hear those very strong words from the U.S. president a short while ago? What's the feeling where you are right now?
Well, you know, I just by happenstance, I was in Buffalo. I grew up in Buffalo. And so, you know, here, there's a lot of heartbreak because it's quite a tight-knit community considering it's a city. And so, you know, the fact that this person brought this fight, you know, to our doorstep or to my friend's doorstep now who continue to live here is very heartbreaking. I think, you know, the U.S. president is reacting to a lot of unease, you know, and certainly political upheaval in the U.S. surrounding race and the discussions about race. It's very complicated. It's a difficult conversation for most people to have, but it must move forward. And this may be a punctuated moment for the United States to really coalesce around this and figure out how we all move forward, regardless of culture or race or gender or any of those things.
Let me bring in Curtis Young on this because there were some very blunt words by the U.S. president in this speech. What happened here is simple and straightforward terrorism, domestic terrorism. He called out those who falsely believe that they will be replaced. And he said, I condemn those who spread the lie for power, political gain, and profit. How is this moment different from other mass shootings where we've seen U.S. presidents come? I'm thinking most notably in Connecticut. For instance.
It's not different. It's not. This has been going on since the beginning of the country. This is this idea that you know, it's really interesting. America started 1619, Jamestown, English settlers. At the same time, a boat of 20 enslaved Africans. So it's like two strands of the same DNA have created this project that's called America. So we're interlinked. But the terror against Black Americans has been going on for the whole 200 and something years. I didn't want to rehearse the whole history. I'll just pick out a couple of moments. In 1915, when blacks had to flee the South from the terror of the Ku Klux Klan. Senator Bill Bow, who espoused replacement theory in 1937 to 1945, that eventually through miscegenation we're all going to be replaced.
But Curtis, all these events that are well chronicled throughout history.
Yeah.
However, today you have contradictory evidence. On the one hand, you've never had so many mixed marriages in the United States, and on the other hand, we have hate crimes like this one.
Because the racism is in the United States is systemic. It's systemic. This is not episodic, and it is contradictory. How are Black African Americans replacing white people? We're not immigrants. We're part of the country. We've been part of the country since its inception. Everybody in that country is from someplace else. So this replacement theory and import from France that is being embraced by certain Americans is dealing with immigration and these kinds of issues. But it's all being used for political capital. It's all being used to get elected. It's all being used to frighten people against one group of people against another. This class conflict has been going on since the beginning, President.
There was lots of Republicans who've denounced this as a racist crime. I'm thinking of U.S. Senator Ted Cruz, for instance, who did it. What we are seeing, though, the number 3 of the House of Representatives, who's come under scrutiny, she was a congresswoman who had liberal views on lots of issues in the past, but has seen this replacement theory seep into her discourse. Elisa Stepanek, she represents Northern New York State. She tweeted her sympathy with those killed after the shooting. Maybe we can show the tweet. She said in it, very saddened to hear the tragic news of fellow New Yorkers in Buffalo. We are praying for the entire community and law enforcement at this time. So no mention there of the fact that it was a racist attack, or at least all signs point to it, and we're getting more and more evidence of it. When Joe Biden was talking about silence being complicity, is that what he was referring to?
He may have. I don't know what he was referring to, but the fact that you're talking about Elise Stefanik, Congresswoman from New York, yes, as did I mispronounce her name?
No, Stefanik, it's fine.
Yeah, as a supporter of the replacement theory, that's just not correct. She's not a replacement. She's not a supporter of this replacement theory. And so that's just a lie being spread by the Democrat Party and media. She does not. She
ran Facebook ads in 2021
yes.
Espousing the replacement.
That's not correct. Sorry to say, it's not correct. She talked. No, if I can finish what I'm going to say, she talked about the problem with amnesty and an open door policy on our southern border by Joe Biden. That there's so many. I mean, we have a record number of illegal immigration that came in just last year, over 2 million.
Number of immigrants is down in the United States.
The number of illegal immigrants is up. We've never had more than 2 million in 1 year, okay? So, and then there's a movement through Joe Biden's plans to make a lot of them, give them amnesty and a road to legal status and a road to citizenship, which then they have a right to vote. And all she was talking about was nothing to do with race, but to do with we shouldn't be having all these illegals come in and give them the right to vote, and they'll probably vote Democrat. So it has nothing to do with racism.
The Fox News
and that's
host
the
Tucker
problem in the
Carlson,
United States.
Fox News host Tucker Carlson, he's more blunt than that. He says that it's a plan to bring these people in from abroad to get them to vote for the Democrats.
It could be.
So you believe?
Do you know otherwise? Do you know otherwise? It could be.
That's just silly.
They want.
Let me just.
It's to say it's silly is well, it could be. But anyway, this is the problem in the United States. We grieve right now. We're grieving for the people in Buffalo, but people claiming that this person is racist, they're a Republican, they support, it's their fault, it's Elise's fault because this person went and shot up these people. The person who's at fault is the shooter, no one else. He's a deranged, lunatic psychopath.
We always say that. We always say these guys are deranged, lunatic psychopaths. This guy had a manifesto. He had a 108-page manifesto.
Yeah.
He had the N-word on his rifle.
Yeah.
He had scouted out the place. He had planned if he had not caught him to go to another place.
He was a racist.
But each one of them is not a deranged lone wolf exception. These people, he in fact cited a replacement theory. He's been hearing this.
Okay.
So this idea
so he's
that
a
this
deranged racist psychopath who went and killed people.
Look
for him. So hold on. You're making it. I'll bring in Jennifer Carlson on this. Jennifer, did this happen in a vacuum? That's the question. Is it somebody who's mentally unstable, or is it a context that's political?
I think it's both. I think that, we have very violent rhetoric going on in the United States from both sides, and somebody who is mentally unstable and, is looking for his place in society and finds it in these extreme groups will listen to that sort of rhetoric, and it's a launch pad. But I just want to back up for a second. Let's not conflate the issue here. We are not talking about immigration. This is about race in America.
Exactly.
This is about African Americans that are here now. This is about Caucasian people that are here now. We have a really difficult time talking about race because there's so much finger pointing and so much blame that people can't have constructive conversations. And that frustration builds on both sides, in the Black community, in the more white communities, and with these extremist groups. We need to be focusing on the extremism and the political rhetoric that is violent, and it's from both sides. There needs to be more compassion about how people are feeling if they're afraid. There needs to be more explanation. obviously there are criminals, that are part of this process, and they will act out, and we need to be ready for that. But, in order for us to heal, in order for us to move on, in order for any of these moments to launch us into a better place, the finger pointing and the what did she mean by this and what did he mean by that, it's absolutely irrelevant. We need to be having conversations about how we live next to each other.
I fully agree with you.
And so, calling the Democrats said this and the Republicans said this, it's ridiculous. I know Democrats that are racist. I know Republicans that are racist, and I know both that are amazing, wonderful people that live in harmony. So if we can move this out of a political conversation between two parties and into a human conversation about our society and a society problem that, not just here in the United States. I've lived in France. I've lived in Italy. It's a problem everywhere, but we need to be having those conversations without who cares about Tucker Carlson. He's on TV. That's all he does. That's what he does for a living. And, fair enough. He's made a great name for himself in exacerbating some of these issues.
But on that point, Jennifer Carlson, I mentioned him because the number 3 of the Republican Party in the House of Representatives sounds an awful lot like him these days when she talks about these issues. So he does have influence.
Yeah. I mean, well, does he have influence or is he mimicking what they're saying? I'm not quite sure. But, Elise is from New York. She's from a northern part of New York, which is very rural. There's a lot of rural poor. It's, it's a lot of white people, but there's also a lot of, migrant workers in her district. I can't speak for the Congresswoman. I don't agree with her on many issues, but I think the president is the leader. And the leader needs to show us that we can have a conversation without it pointing fingers and saying that Republican or that Democrat. It needs to start at the top. And I'm hopeful that, moving forward, I know that he had some harsh things to say today. It's a reaction. I'm hoping that he reflects and moves forward trying to bring people together, not alienate people.
We had a president before this president. I found this quote today who said, the fundamental question of our time is whether the West has the will to survive. Do we have the confidence in our values to defend them at any cost? Do we have enough respect for our citizens to protect the borders, the courage to preserve our civilization in the face of those who want to subvert and destroy it? That comes right out of replacement theory rhetoric.
Was Donald Trump.
That was Donald Trump. Stephen Miller says similar things. I'm not going to go through all the quotes. I found Bannon's quotes. I found Getz's quotes and Matt Walsh and Janine Pirro and Laura Ingraham. This is not pointing fingers. This is saying that there's a toxicity in our airwaves, and deranged people pick up on those things. So it's not about picking on people. It's saying we have a discourse. We have a national discourse that is feeding derangement, that is creating situations like we have in Buffalo today, tomorrow, where will it be in California, the day after that in which, where will it be? It continues. And so I agree with you that we need to have a human conversation, but at the same time, I disagree that we sweep under the rug or ignore this rhetoric that is inflaming the situation.
Well, if I may,
I'm not actually advocating to ignore it.
Sorry, my ear module just came out.
I think I'm on a little bit of a delay, so I apologize. I think.
Hold on, one at a time. We'll just tell Paul. There you go. You have to wrap it around the ear, the earpiece. Let me first bring in Paul Reen and then Jennifer.
I mean, if I may. I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name of the nice Buffalonian.
Jennifer Carlson.
Jennifer, I thought the way Jennifer spoke I was 100% correct, in agreement. You're talking about both sides, the heated rhetoric on both sides. What disappoints me, Curtis, is you're only talking, when all your examples are of harsh rhetoric are right-wingers. Right-wing media, and it comes from both sides.
Because these are the guys that are saying it.
See, that's the problem. It comes from both sides.
Give me an example of harsh left-wing media that is inciting killing
CNN,
killing
MSNBC,
of
all
black
of
think we're
people
getting away from the
and
point here.
So it's not really.
and give
it's
me an
not worth-
example.
An example, all of them: CNN, MSNBC,
That's general.
ABC.
That's
Well,
a
listen,
network.
we don't have
Okay, but-
time to. The
But this
the
is
issue
what we're spending
is
the time on talking about these people and the extreme people talking about it, as opposed to all of
But
us
these
here.
people,
Extreme
these people
people
wield,
talking
have
about
wielded
it.
and will wield power
No.
again, Jennifer.
Yeah.
If they take back power, if they win the elections in November. And so let me ask you, Paul Reen, the Republican Party. There are people who are proudly conservatives
Absolutely.
and who believe in free market values and who are conservative on social issues as well. But to espouse white supremacy
we
views,
denounce white
or
supremacy.
to equivocate like Donald
not-
Trump did after the Charlottesville, saying they're good people on both sides.
Okay, that's a lie that he was referring to the Nazis. He was not. That's
he was
been a
referring to the
lie.
people protesting he was referring to the extremists who were protesting in Charlottesville.
They weren't extremists. They were people who were protesting the tearing down of controversial statues. The lie from the left has been that Donald
They
Trump
were
called,
chanting anti-Semitic slogans.
They were chanting, "You will
Nazis
not replace
were.
us."
There was a different
you
group.
will not replace
Those are the
us.
Nazis. See, this is the problem. You guys are conflating things and saying most Republicans or Republican news channels
Haven't
are
said
racist.
most Republicans. Haven't said most
The
Republicans. I've said
report
specific
that
Republicans.
started this meeting here, this show, only referenced white people, white mass shootings done by white people. You notice that. But I mean, the problem is it's coming from both sides.
I
so we
haven't
have to
seen
have an
any mass
open,
shootings
Have there
by
honest
been
black
mass
dialogue.
shootings from
I haven't seen any mass shootings.
The introduction to this show.
right? But who else has recently committed mass shootings?
Well, we had mass shooting
just
in New
talk
York
about
City last
urban
month.
sort
Last month there was a
Sure.
shooting
Yes,
in New York
there was
City
on
in
the
the subway,
subway.
right?
Yeah.
That was a black anti-white person on his YouTube channel. He was
I agree.
clearly anti-white.
Yes, he
He
was.
set a smoke bomb in the subway
Yes,
and
he
shot
did.
10 people.
Not denying
Luckily,
that.
no one died, but 10 people could have died.
Absolutely. That's
Right?
true.
In Waukesha, Wisconsin, last November, what happened? A black man driving an SUV ran down 6 people. 3 of those people were etched into the rifle of the shooter in Buffalo. You see, so there's violence on both sides, and what we need to do is talk about that and get to a point in America, like you had said, that we shouldn't be doing anything to increase racial animosity.
Well, let's maybe talk about that in a different way. One among the victims from Saturday's shooting, 65-year-old Celestine Cheney. She was a grandmother of 6. Her son describes the ordeal of discovering his mom's death over social media.
If a nipple come out, it's oh my God, you can get suspended, and your account is hacked. But you can share violence without a problem. And I didn't find out. Nobody knocked on my door like the usual process. I found out in a Facebook picture. My mom was gunned down. Then I watched the video on social media.
He found out over the Facebook picture and then watched the video on social media. Now, we heard the U.S. president in his speech talking about the need to have the courage to stop the internet from festering hate. That requires regulation, and social media giants and tech giants, in this case Twitch, an Amazon-owned company, recognizing that they are publishers, just like we're broadcasters who are responsible if we say things that are out of line here. Is it time for a change when it comes to the fact that, again, the hate can spread so fast?
Yeah, I agree.
So
that
social media to me is a
is that a
social
question
problem.
to me?
It's a technological problem, and it's very interesting. This morning, I saw an interview with Ian Bremmer, who just put out a book. But he was talking about, this disruptive technology that we have, which social media is a part of. And we've learned in the past that destructive technology, such as nuclear weapons, was the example that he used, needs to be controlled, right? And that in the wrong hands, it can be abused. And we were very successful at that. We need to look at some of these technological advances, social media being one of them, and take a look at how it can be destructive and how we need to control that. And it's not about controlling speech. I am 100% believer in free speech. If we're not listening to each other, we're not finding common ground, we're not solving problems. So people need to say what they feel and what they think, and we need to have a conversation about it. But the technology aspect of it, where somebody can spread something like this replacement theory, which by the way, I never heard of it before. I work in public policy. I've never heard of it before until that kid said it after these shootings. But if you're on social media all the time and you're buying into that, that's the aspect of technology, that disruptive technology, that we have to learn to control. And that's where public policy should be focusing on, so that it doesn't spread like wildfire. We don't need hate to spread like wildfire. We have enough trouble keeping it contained without social media.
So, Curtis Young, your thoughts? Because again, you're here in France, gentlemen, and they're trying at the European Union level to regulate it a bit more. Will the United States catch up when it comes to this?
I'm not optimistic because I totally agree with Rachel?
Jennifer,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I totally agree with Jennifer in terms of the technological part of it. But the problem that we have is the market incentive. That is to say, the more clicks, the more money. And so, Facebook or what do they call themselves now? Meta. They have been dragging their feet for years in dealing with regulating this kind of speech because because they're really focused on their bottom line. And so if we can this is one of the problems. If somehow pull back from this neoliberal market incentivized world that we live in and begin to look at a space where we look at responsibility for the social fabric.
It's a question.
Then we can begin to do some things like this, I think.
At what point does it become a question of public safety? I mean, you can't just let people spread hate.
Absolutely
wantonly.
Not. I'm a big, like Jennifer, I'm a big advocate of free speech, First Amendment in the United States, but the First Amendment does not cover calls for violence. So if there's any like white supremacists or anti-white, African Americans who are proposing violence and spewing violence and hatred, that should be blocked. That's not free speech. But I think we're also missing, but I believe in more dialogue, less dialogue. But I think we're missing something, if I can just quickly say.
Where can be the common ground, though, before we move on that issue of how do you get to the point where there's a minimum of increased regulation at the national level in the United States? Because this affects, viewers are watching us around the world. How the U.S. regulates the internet matters so much because it's U.S. big tech companies that rule.
Yeah. Well, as I said, regulating calls for violence, calls for murder. This person.
Can there be bipartisan support on this?
Of course there is. I mean, everyone believes in. Republicans don't support violence or racism. Okay, so if somebody is espousing violence and murder, like this shooter in Buffalo did a year ago. When he was in high school, he said that he wanted to commit a mass shooting suicide a year ago.
Why is he on the street?
Right.
That's what I wanted.
Jennifer, that's the question. That's what I'm trying to get at. What we're missing in this discussion is there needs to be a lot of questions answered by the local police. This shooter didn't come from Buffalo. He drove 200 to 300 miles. Right. To get to Buffalo, as Jennifer said. I'm also from Buffalo, so it hits home. But the fact that the police didn't have this guy on the radar and how he purchased his gun, and he spent 2 days in a mental hospital. Did he pass a background check? I don't know these questions, I don't know the answers to these questions, but there's somebody fell down that responsibility as well.
U.S. President saying it's time for a ban on assault rifles. What excuse can there be for assault rifles?
Personal protection.
personal protection.
Yes, absolutely.
A simple handgun does not
No,
suffice.
not if you live out in the rural country and somebody's, you have 3 guys come in and break into your house. Absolutely. So, and even if you do ban them, they will find a way to get them. I think
They're hard to get over here, by the way.
Well, in New
they're
York, we
already
have some of the
exist in the
strictest
United
gun
States.
laws. in
Jennifer
the-
Carlson, you say you've lived in Europe. Explain to Europeans why private citizens would need an assault rifle.
Well, it's a very difficult thing to explain because then they would really have to understand states' rights and the federal system that we have. And that's one thing that I noticed going to Sciences. I went to Sciences Po, and I have a master's in international security from them. But what I realized when I was there is that most of the world doesn't understand the federal process here because they come from places where it's a very strong federal system, where the federal government, kind of dominates. And the United States is very different. And so you have states' rights here. What I can say is that New York State
states'
has
rights,
some of the
excuse me, isn't that
strictest-
code for gun companies making a lot of money?
No. It's not code for anything. It is fundamental to the American way of life. And so if people toss aside this concept of states' rights, you miss the whole point here. The whole point here is that, the federal government has a certain role and that people migrate into states that best reflect their own values. That being said, let me finish. Do I think that regular citizens need assault rifles? I absolutely do not. Do I believe that every citizen has the right to acquire a firearm if they go through the processes and they get licensed and, mental health checks or whatever it is? I absolutely believe they do. And so that is fundamental across the board in the US. But yeah, I've seen people if you live in a rural community, you don't need military style weapons. It's unnecessary. Can that be regulated? It should be regulated. But we have an illegal gun problem here in the US. And so if this kid didn't get this gun legally, he was intent on doing this. He would have acquired a firearm illegally. We have some of the strictest gun laws in the nation in New York. And he still was able to acquire a firearm. We have gun violence
Over the
in
counter,
New York
he's
City.
18. It's
Mayor
incredible.
Eric Adams is struggling with the illegal gun violence in New York City. So we have a problem with illegal guns. But if we're going to bring it back to the Constitution and why everybody believes that they have, or why a lot of people believe that they have a right to have a firearm, it's fundamental in being able to protect yourself. And that's never going to go away. That's not something that's going to end.
Curtis Young.
Can I jump in really quickly? There are two
Yes.
things that I have to argue. First of all, one of the things that we don't have in Europe is a fugitive slave law, which is what the Second Amendment was around. How do we haul in these fugitive slaves? Number one, and states' rights does have a profound meaning. It goes back to the lost cause narrative that began to try to explain the Civil War, and it was what Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan used in their Southern strategy to encourage Southern Democrats to vote for Republicans, which changed the demographic of the Republican and the Democratic Party. So states' rights has a powerful meaning in the American narrative.
But I'm going to disagree with you that it comes out of the 1970s and 1980s. It absolutely does not.
No. It comes out of 1865. The argument of states' rights was, with the lost cause narrative, and this is clear history, the argument was that the Civil War was not about slavery. It was about states having the right to determine for themselves. It was about, and so this argument
but the
of states'
Constitution was written
rights,
before the Civil War, long before the Civil War.
I'm not speaking about the Constitution. I'm speaking
but
about
states' rights is in the Constitution. That's how it's set up.
Yes, exactly. And so when South Carolina seceded from the Union, it was under their states' rights. States' rights has always meant I, as a state, have the right to determine the destiny of my state. This was
within the constitutional framework, and they didn't have permission in the Constitution.
This was very
to see from the
clear.
nation.
This was very clear in the Southern strategy. wasn't it?
Because
we're
Southern
running short on-
strategy abusing states' rights doesn't mean that states' rights doesn't have a significance in how we govern in this country. If we didn't
It
have
has a
states' rights,
profound
the
We're running
It has
short
a
on time.
profound
and we're
significance.
running short on time, and I do want to. I do want to ask.
It has a
'cause
profound significance.
We've spent most of the hour talking about the problem in the United States, but it's a globalized world, and we saw it with the Christchurch shooting, where the shooter who targeted a mosque also live streamed it, and also referred to the great replacement, or the replacement theory, originally coined by a French intellectual,
Camus.
Renaud Camus, no relation to the literature prize winner. And we saw last fall, in the early days of France's presidential election, a TV and print pundit, Éric Zemmour, was kind of sucking the oxygen in the early parts of the race. He was touting great replacement theories directed at Muslim immigrants were trying to take over. They were widely amplified by a cable news channel, in this case CNews. His terminology even seeped into the language of mainstream candidate Valérie Pécresse as she tried to kickstart a faltering campaign. There was a rally at an arena in Paris back in February where she used the term great replacement. And it was what Americans call a Hail Mary, trying to kickstart her fledgling campaign at the time. Paulrine, it's concerning that these crackpot theories are going mainstream.
Well, I'm not here to defend any certain politician, but I mean, you say it's a crackpot theory, so you don't believe that there is a growing number of foreigners in France?
Well, in the Great Replacement theory, that the idea that there is a cabal where Jews are involved.
Okay, I don't know about that. I don't know much about a Great Replacement theory.
To replace white citizens by immigrants and by minorities.
I think there's obviously, I mean, you can't deny that there's frustration and animosity building up amongst French for so many immigrants moving into the country. I think the problem there is not the number of immigrants. The United States is based on immigration, you know. The city of Buffalo is based on immigration. We have tons of nationalities all over the city. We embrace immigration. We always have. But you have to assimilate as well into the culture of your new home. And I think a lot of the frustration that builds up when people don't assimilate. They don't take on the French customs. They don't learn the language. And that creates problems, and that creates animosity. And I think it's a discussion about assimilation, respect, and some of these problems will start to decrease.
Curtis Young, your thoughts on the Éric Zemmour phenomenon that we witnessed here?
For me, it was a very different context. It's a completely different context. Look, Camus' argument is that there's a cabal of elites that are intentionally bringing immigrants in order to replace white people. That's the argument. This is an argument that Steve Miller embraced. He quoted at a certain point Camus' book, and Éric Zemmour has done the same thing. So
Steve Miller, an advisor to Donald Trump.
Advisor to Donald Trump, and so when we talk about replacement theory, it doesn't mean we're concerned that there's illegal immigration or there's too much immigration, this sort of thing. The replacement theory says that there is a cabal of elites.
Gotcha. But you're accusing everyone who talks about problems of immigration as being a proponent and supporter of replacement theory.
That is not.
When a lot of people,
not what we're doing.
Like Jennifer admitted, and even me, don't know all the details of what you're saying.
But Éric Zemmour said replacement theory. He knows what he's talking about.
I'm not here to talk about Éric Zemmour. I'm talking about the problems in the United States and the Buffalo shooter.
But the thing is, it's not limited to the United States. This is becoming a worldwide phenomenon. We've seen this in Poland.
Yeah. But I think excuse me, Curtis, I respect what you're saying, but I just want to say I'm not defending the replacement theory or anything. My point was it's a global phenomena.
I agree.
Because there's not assimilation in those host countries today. I see it every day in France, where people don't say bonjour when they go into the boulangerie, and people get upset. If you're in the host country, you respect those customs of the host. They can't speak French. I speak French.
I think
you know what I'm saying. That's becoming a global phenomenon. It's creating a racial issue, and it needs to. We have to have more assimilation, more dialogue, more understanding.
I understand what you're saying. How is this connected to walking into a supermarket and killing 50 people?
Yeah,
so intolerance is a global issue.
Into New Zealand to a church.
Sure, and white supremacists should be rooted out and
one at a time. Jennifer Carlson, go ahead.
What I'm saying is intolerance is not an issue in the U.S. It's not a European issue. Intolerance is a global issue.
Right.
We're seeing it in Ukraine right now.
Exactly.
We you can see it on the border between India and
we're not
Pakistan.
talking about intolerance here. We're talking about a tidy conspiracy theory.
Well, which comes out of intolerance, does it not? I mean, are we going to look at the root issues here? I mean, the root issue is intolerance, and the root issue also is about assimilation. It is a fair argument. It is very difficult for people in a Western society to have to live amongst people who don't live with Western values. There's a lot of confusion there. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And I think a lot of focus needs to be on that. But that's part of the immigration issue. And again, that's not about race in America. That's not about race in other parts of Europe. However, intolerance is, and it is a root problem and a root cause, and it should be the focus of all the politicians. It should be the focus of global governance. How do we spread tolerance to counter the spread of intolerance?
Totally agree. But look, what we're doing is we're conflating immigration concerns and this idea of the Great Replacement theory. This theory, I did do a little bit of research, and I found that Maurice Barrès' nationalist writings are the ideological genealogy of Great Replacement theory. This is 1889 when he's arguing this, where people we didn't have that many people from other countries coming into France. He argued about a replacement
of the native
foreigners
we didn't like. They were Italians.
Exactly. The native population under the combined effect of immigration, decline of birth rates was happening in France. This is 1889, and it continues. Edouard Drummond picked it up with La France Juive. An anti-Semitic thing in 1886.
But it doesn't mean Laura Ingraham of Fox News, because she talks about the problems of illegal immigration,
Talking
is a
about
supporter
the problems
of
of
replacement
immigration
theory.
is one thing. Talking about seeding this idea of the Great Replacement, that there are people...
She didn't talk about that. See, that's the thing. You're the one conflating, saying all these people on Fox News are talking, and Republicans are supporting replacement theory. That's how you introduce the show. Is it going to help them in the midterms?
I have found Laura
it's
Ingram's quote. Laura, I found her quote about replacement theory. Laura Ingraham, she says...
This is one of the presenters on Fox News. Yeah.
She says, Democrats want to replace you. Of this, my friend, you can be sure. Your views on immigration will have zero impact and zero influence on a House dominated by immigrant Democrats who want to replace you, the American voters, with newly amnesty citizens and an ever-increasing number of change.
Curtis, she's talking about voters.
Newly
If you make 11
citizens.
million illegal immigrants citizens tomorrow, they're going to buy. If Biden does that, they will vote Democrat because he made them citizens. She's talking about voters.
That's happening in New York.
She's not talking about race.
This is 2018.
She's talking about voters.
In 2018, Joe Biden was not the president. This is in October 2018.
So I'm just going to point
Jennifer
something out.
Democrats in
Jennifer Carlson.
On this point, I'm going to point something out. And in New York City, they are approving an ordinance because New York City has the right to govern itself under certain conditions, where they are going to give illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, however you want to classify them today, the right to vote in local elections.
Yes.
And so
immediately
now, not. And
I mean, whether you agree,
foreigners were EU citizens of the right to vote in municipal elections in this country. By the way,
I'm sorry. What?
Foreigners who are EU citizens have the right to vote in municipal elections in this country.
Okay. Well, they don't here in the U.S. And because the U.S., all politics is local. And so those local politicians who are elected make up the people who choose the Electoral College. It is not that far away here in the U.S. Yeah. And so I've talked to people from all different backgrounds, of all different colors. American citizens have a problem with that, because what's the point of being a citizen if we can't even, as citizens, not of any specific
So
color.
are you
as
suggesting,
citizens-
Jennifer, are you suggesting that there is an active campaign by the Democrats to
no.
to replace,
No.
There is.
not just to let the
No,
aliens vote, but to
Please don't
replace?
put words in my mouth.
Yeah,
I
not
am
rep-
absolutely not
I'm
saying
asking you
that.
a question.
I'm not talking about Democrats. I'm not talking about Republicans. I'm talking about it is, there are people on both sides of the aisle. Again, I never heard of replacement theory before Sunday. And so, no, I don't think there's a cabal. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I paid no attention to any of that sort of nonsense that was coming out of the Trump rhetoric. It's nonsense. There's
I think the Democrats are talking about replacement theory more than Republicans.
But it doesn't matter. I don't want to talk about Democrats
Yeah.
or Republicans. We're
Yeah.
talking about these really
But you mentioned Donald
incredibly
Trump.
important issues.
Go ahead,
We can't-
Jennifer. Last word, because we're out of time. Go ahead, Jennifer Carlson.
I just want to thank both of the guests for having these conversations. I think these conversations are important, even if we all, agree to disagree. That's how, civility will move forward.
And thank you so much. And our thoughts go to
Thank
all
you.
those who are from Buffalo.
Buffalo's motto is a city of neighbors.
Paul Reen, Jennifer
So
Carlson.
it's
I
pulling
want to
together,
thank you
and
as
we'll
well.
pull together.
I want to thank Curtis Young. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24
Thank you.
debate.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
And we're still on to you.